Now it's time to learn about rounding. Remember, when we are rounding, we're going to be rounding to a specific place. So let's use this one as an example. As you can see, the tenths place is underlined. The 2 is in the tenths place. The 0 is in the ones, 2 is in the tenths, 7 is in the hundredths, and 1 is in the thousandths. Remember, when we're in decimals, we have to use that TH at the end. So the 2 is in the tenths place and it's underlined. So we're going to look 1 to the right. We're going to draw an arrow over it. Yes, it's going to feel silly in the beginning, but we need to draw that arrow to remind us where we're looking. So once we've drawn that arrow, we know we're going to say 5 or more, raise the score, 4 or less, let it rest. That 7 is more than 5. I'm going to draw a plus above it. I know it's more than 5. So this 2 needs to become a 3. Now, before we can do that, we need to make sure we're rewriting everything to the left of it just the same. For this one, it's just 0 and a decimal point. That 2 becomes a 3, and there's nothing after it. Remember, when you're rounding, there's nothing after the place value that you're rounding to. In this time, we're rounding to the tenths place, so there should be nothing after the tenths place. Let's go ahead and look at the next one. 1 and 815 thousandths. As you can see, the 1 in the hundredths place is underlined. So we're going to draw an arrow over the 5. Remember, 5 or more raise the score, so we are going to raise that score. Let's go ahead and rewrite everything to the left. 1 and 8, raise that score up to a 2. 1 and 82 hundredths. Remember, there's nothing after it because there's nothing after the place value that we round to. Let's look at another one. 12 and 671 thousandths. As you can see, that 6 is underlined, so we're going to go ahead and draw that arrow over the 7, 1 to the right. 6, 5 or more, raise the score, so we're going to raise our score here. Everything to the left stays the same, 12, and now it's time to round. The 6 rounds up to a 7 since we raised the score, 12 and 7 tenths. Let's look at another one. 9 and 956 thousandths. The 5 in the hundredths place is underlined, so we're going to draw an arrow over our 6. 5 or more, raise the score. So we're going to know we're going to raise our score. So that 5 is going to become a 6. Rewrite everything else. 9 and 96 hundredths. Remember, nothing after the 6. I think we've got a couple more like this before we're going to move on to a different way to do it. 1 and 142 thousandths. The 1 is underlined. Draw an arrow over the 4. 4 or less, let it rest. We're going to let it rest. So rewrite it. 1 and 1/10. Remember, nothing comes after the number that is underlined. One more. 6 and 932 thousandths. This one's a little bit different because the 6 is underlined. So we're going to treat it exactly the same. We're going to go 1 to the right, draw an arrow. It's a 9, so we know we have to raise the score. If we're going to raise a 6, it's going to become a 7. We would typically rewrite everything to the left the same, but since there's nothing to the left, our answer is just 7. Now let's look at a different way you may be given these problems. 6 and 851 thousandths rounded to the tenths place. So here you have to identify the place you are rounding to. So it says the tenths place. We know the 8 is in the tenths place. So we're going to draw an arrow over our 5. Now it's exactly the same as the ones we've been doing. So we know that if 5 or more raise the score, we're going to raise our score. That 8 is going to become a 9. So let's rewrite everything else. 6 and 9/10. Done. Let's do a couple more. 3 and 87 hundredths to the ones place. So we're going to underline our 3 in our ones place and draw our arrow over the 8. We know that 8 or more raise or 5 or more raise the score. So we're going to raise the score. That 3 is going to become a 4. There's nothing to the left, so it's going to stay as a 4. This is our last one. 2 and 781 thousandths rounded to the hundredths place. Hundredths. Remember, your hundredths is your 8. So we're going to draw a line under the 8 and an arrow over the 1. 5 or more, raise the score. 4 or less, let it rest. That 1's going to let the 8 rest. So we're going to rewrite everything. 2 and 78 hundredths. We do not write the 1 because remember, you don't write anything to the right of the number that is underlined. All right, now you're going to have some to practice with before you work with me on page 171 in your Go Math book, before you do some on your own, and meet me back in that Google Meet.